Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the next NASEO Financing Committee call for this summer. Really glad to have you all here. This is a really important topic, and we're glad you can tune in to listen to our speakers and ask questions. We are going to be discussing the financing provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act that was recently passed by Congress and signed into law by President Biden. I will turn things over in a second to our co-chairs, Eddie and Robin. If you do have questions, please feel free to make sure to put them in the chat box or in the question and answer box, and we'll make sure to get to them once we get to the discussion portion of the session. Eddie and Robin, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Go ahead, Eddie.
All right. Hello, everybody. Eddie Trevino in Texas. One of the housekeeping measures that we always take care of at the beginning of every meeting is to make sure that you stay in mute and put your questions, like Sam said, in the chat box if you do have questions. I'm excited about the Inflation Reduction Act. I'm also a little bit overwhelmed by it as well. We had a rebate program in Texas during ARA, and we made headlines, but for the wrong reason. And so, as you can expect, you know, when we saw rebates, it was kind of like rebates, yeah, and then other financing programs that are available. So it's a whole new world for us with this. We're excited about the opportunity to help a whole bunch of people in our state. So, and I'm looking forward to this session because I have questions like everybody else does. So, Robin, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I'm Robin. I'm with the Montana State Energy Office. I'm just going to echo what Eddie said. We are also very excited and feeling a bit overwhelmed. I ran around the office before this meeting, just checking in with everyone to see if they had any updates. And we're really just scratching the surface when it comes to planning for this piece of IRA. So also very excited to hear from our panelists today and find out what other states are up to as well. So we can go ahead and introduce our panelists today. First, we have Laura Gillum. She's Senior Policy Advisor for Clean Air and Climate, U.S. Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works. We also have Jeffrey Genzer, General Counsel for Duncan, Weinberg, Genzer, and Pembroke, also NASEO General Counsel, and as well as Gwen Yamamoto Lau. Hopefully I didn't butcher that. Beautiful name. Executive Director with the Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority. Laura, do you want to go first? Oh, you're on mute.
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I too am very excited about the Inflation Reduction Act. It was a labor of love, and I can say that no one worked harder than Chairman Carper to get it across the finish line. So we are just thrilled that we're now talking about implementation about all these wonderful programs. And you know, there are a lot of questions, and there will be a lot of questions. You know, you know, how EPA will implement on the EPW title these massive programs. There is some leeway to the agencies on how the programs will be implemented. You know, it is going to be a huge endeavor for EPA, who is an agency that normally has a budget of $9 billion. And, you know, one program in our title is $27 billion. And there's many more other programs. So we have about $41 billion in the Environmental Public Works Committee title alone. And that's really what I'm here to talk about. I serve as was mentioned, I serve as Chairman Carper's team lead for climate and clean air and energy. I also handle his energy finance work. So can talk a little bit on the finance side, but really here to talk about the EPW title and the EPA programs. Just starting, I think what you guys are really interested in is section 60103, the Greenhouse Gas Fund, or could be called the Green Bank, or the Accelerator, has many different names. There's $27 billion to EPA to allocate funds through that fund, and we've chopped it up in several different pieces. First, there's $7 billion specifically for state grants. We expect, based on our conversations with basically the way we drafted that, we expect that to go directly towards solar. EPA may do some other technologies, but I really believe that will be state grants focused on solar. And I would point you to the Sanders solar bill as kind of maybe a template of what we were thinking of what that amount of money would be for. We do designate that money is for low income and disadvantaged communities. That is a term that we use throughout the title. It is not defined. As you may know, EPA has defines low income and disadvantaged in different ways across different programs. So I think that the states really, I think early need to be engaging on EPA on how to help set that definition. We use similar definition in the Clean School Bus program in the bipartisan infrastructure law. And there's been some questions of whether certain schools can or can't qualify. So again, I think this is a pretty gray area where the agency is going to have to decipher what this means. And I think that input from the states is going to be very valuable. Then just moving forward, there's $8 billion for more traditional climate bank money, specifically for, again, low income and disadvantaged communities. And then $11 billion for general bank activities. Now, this is money that can't go directly to states, but could go to green banks that are funded by states. So I know that many of you already have that in place. Again, that's for the $8 billion and the 11 plus billion can't go directly to states. They have to go to a nonprofit. But again, it could be a nonprofit set up by a state. Then I just wanted to touch base on a couple of other programs and then really open up for questions after the panel is finished, because I think that's what you guys probably have specific questions to your needs. Wanted to direct you all to section 60114. That's the climate pollution reduction grants. This is money directly to states. And the thought here is we're mimicking what we did in the bipartisan infrastructure law for the transportation sector, in the sense that we're giving money to states to create a climate plan. But we did that for the transportation sector, just for transportation. Now we're asking for a climate plan across all sectors. And then we provide a substantial amount of money to help states implement those plans. And now you may be thinking, well, that's my air office, or that's a DEQ, that may not be me that's putting that plan together, but it is across all sectors. And I think there is a huge role for the energy offices to play in developing those plans and applying for money to implement those plans. So again, that is specifically, it's $5 billion. That's a huge amount of money, and going directly to states. A couple other programs, we have this section 60101, the heavy duty vehicle program. There's $1 billion there. That's for class 6, class 7 vehicles. Basically, that's school buses and garbage trucks, maybe some beverage vehicles. So I think this will be, EPA will probably implement this similar to what they're doing with the Clean School Bus program. But they can use it for training. They can use the money for electric infrastructure as well. So just be aware that that money exists. Then there's 60102, which is $3 billion to help states reduce emissions at ports. That money can go directly to states. It could also go to port authorities. Again, you may be asking, why am I bringing this up to you all? But we envision a lot of this money going towards electrification, and your offices, could help on that front. And then there's 60201, which is the environmental and climate justice grants. There's $3 billion in this pot of money. Now, this money is not directly for states, it's for local governments in partnership with nonprofit organizations. However, I think this is one of those pots of money that I think EPA, I think EPA is gonna need to get the money out the door very quickly. It may struggle to on ideas on how to distribute the money. So I think there's a lot of opportunities on the energy side in terms of climate resiliency, adaptation, reductions in energy efficiency, tightening homes up to help protect against wood smoke. There's a whole host of things there that I think, again, states helping out cities could be very to partner with nonprofits. I think states are going to really have a role there to help local governments apply for that funding. So I know that's a lot. I mean, the bill is huge. I appreciate that you guys are kind of mind blown, which I am really excited. I just know that from the bipartisan infrastructure law, that's still rolling out. We've seen that states were a little flat-footed in being able to apply for a lot of that money, and that money is still rolling out. And all I can say is, the more you coordinate with your air office, with your DEQ, with transportation, your transportation offices, electrification is really going to play a huge role in the emissions reductions, and how you coordinate it with your colleagues within your administration to be able to apply for the funds. I think the earlier you can do that, the better. And then, as I said, there are a lot of gray words here for EPA to define. And I think that the sooner you, talk amongst yourselves and help EPA with guidance on the best way to really target the money, to get the money out quickly, because the deadlines for this money, for a lot of these pockets of money, is very quick. And I think EPA is going to be looking for your guidance. So I'll stop there. And like I said, I'm very excited to have this conversation. And as you can tell, very excited about this legislation.
I think I'm up next.
So Laura, we have a question real quick before you go on, if you don't mind, from Dan Adler. He said, we've seen legal requirements that suggest public sector state green banks, such as those in California, are also eligible to receive the capital, not just nonprofits. Do you have any insight whether they would be eligible or not?
Sorry, I'm mute. I'm sorry. Yes. So I think I said it was just a nonprofit, but there's a way for direct money to go directly to a nonprofit green bank, but there's also a way for indirect money to feed green banks that are not considered nonprofits. It could be not-for-profits. So there is flexibility there. So like I said, we provided money. There's money that can go directly to projects, directly to entities, and then there's ways to indirectly fund green banks themselves, so then they can provide money for projects.
Eddie?
Thank you. Yes, Jeff, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I think most of the NASEO people know me, Jeff Genzer. I've been counsel for the organization since some of you haven't been alive since 1986. We're very, very lucky today to have Laura and Gwen with us, and we apologize for the short notice. Laura was the primary drafter for the EPW, Environmental Public Works section of the bill. And in my view, she did a really good job, as she has done in other things over the last 20 years, I guess. So, and Mary Frances Repko, who has worked with NASEO in the past, is the staff director on that committee. And she used to work for Mr. Hoyer. We worked on a lot of programs together. Former NASEO chair, Malcolm Wolf, who had been on EPW staff, worked with Mary Frances at the time of ARA, when the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act moved forward. So my job today, you heard a basic outline of this portion of the bill. I'm going to talk a little bit of history for purposes to help the energy offices out here. And again, Gwen runs a green bank in Hawaii and can be a great asset. And we talked before everybody got on about our mutual 10 friends who really think she does a great job. So that was enough for me. The history of these financing programs, and I'm trying to put this in the context of you shouldn't be overwhelmed. I know you're overwhelmed trying to deal with the infrastructure bill and the slow rollout from the Department of Energy. It's actually a little faster out of EPA, Laura, and now the Inflation Reduction Act. Don't be overwhelmed. As the state energy offices who are on this call know, we actually did 3 sessions last week to brief you on the pieces of the bill. And one of the sessions was just on the $9 billion that are running through your offices for the residential efficiency programs, the rebates and the homes type program. Yes, we're working together on guidance for that. NASEO's put together a task force led by 5 of the state energy directors with an advisory committee. So we hope to get input on those guidance documents. But I guess the context here is, the energy offices started doing financing programs in the 1980s. The first one I worked on was actually, we had to get an amendment to the FY 87 Interior and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill, where the energy conservation programs were once housed. It allowed Iowa and Senator Hatfield from Oregon, Senator Grassley, Senator Harkin worked together on this with us. It allowed the old institutional conservation program funds to be used to set up financing programs in institutional buildings if you had another source of funds. 8 states, including Robin's state of Montana, then followed Iowa's model and set up a very effective financing program. When we got to the time, so in the 1980s, again, while I was working on it, $6 billion was provided to the states from oil overcharge refunds. Eddie probably remembers oil overcharge refunds, but not many other people. And most of those funds went through the energy offices. And it was a start of a lot of those financing programs. We were able to get an amendment in 1990 to the underlying statute that runs the state energy program to allow you to do more robust financing programs. And again, that took effect in 1990. And anyone who has a morbid curiosity, you can look at 42 US Code 6322 D5. There'll be a quiz at the end to see if you remember that statutory site. When the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act came around in 2009, and obviously we worked extensively on that one as well, $3.1 billion was provided through the state energy program, and about $900 million, as I recall, was used for financing programs. 42 states now have some type of financing program, many of them including Gwen's Green Bank example. A lot of them were capitalized from the energy offices through the ARA funds as well. Eddie has one of the really premier programs, their Lone Star financing program. And Eddie will correct me if I'm wrong, but several $100 million of loans and 0 defaults. Am I right, Eddie? Eddie should be a banker. The home energy loan program operated by the state of Nebraska, again, has several $100 million worth of loans worked through the state energy offices with local community banks. And again, I think their defaults were around 200,000 or 300,000 off of $400 million worth of projects. So there is a lot of experience. A lot of the energy programs have done a lot of financing activity. So this is not new. And I'm just trying, Eddie and Robin, and for the state officials on the phone, to urge you to recognize that this is not rocket science. There are people like Gwen out in the states who can work with you as you develop and implement your programs. A couple of other things are worth noting. We have 500 million, actually 425 million that was released on Friday from the Department of Energy for the state energy program, which includes the ability to do financing programs and organize those programs. There's 250 million for a revolving loan program. Again, this is in the infrastructure bill. And I believe we will have a judgment from the general counsel based on the discussions I had late last week, indicate that they will have a broad definition of commercial buildings for purposes of your financing programs. And they will allow you to do any type of financing, whether it's working with your green bank, loan loss reserves, guarantees, buy down programs, etc. Again, that's the 250 million. That was the Manchin proposal. We have our 500 million for the state energy program, the 550 million for the energy efficiency and conservation block grant. 28% of those funds run through the energy offices that you will have to work with the local governments. The number was larger under the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, but we were able to get Congress to include an amendment that the Conference of Mayors had objected to when the bill was first drafted in 2007, that allows the locals and you to do financing programs with the EECBG funds. For those of you who lived through ARA, and Eddie had hair then, it was a real problem to get financing. But that has now been specifically included in that statutory provision. There's $2.3 billion for grid resilience funds, again, on the DOE side, not Laura's side of the bill. And that includes a very wide variety of defined grid resilience. And the information we have indicates, while it's up to the governor to decide who in the state handles that money, the vast majority of those funds will be run by your offices. I mentioned already the $9 billion for the residential efficiency programs, part electrification, part rebates. The negotiations on that one were, let us say, fraught. But I think the ultimate bill is a good bill. And you know, at USDA, there's another $2 billion for the REAP program, which is allowing you to work with farmers and ranchers and rural small business on efficiency and renewable activities. The question the states are asking right now is, why is Jeff going through all these programs that are just going to make my life miserable over the next 5 years? The answer is that the nature of the procurement process at the federal level is such that while the three EPA programs that Laura talked about, they have a lot of flexibility, and I think we can work through that. But for purposes of the procurement process, the Department of Energy, EPA, the federal agencies, by definition, tend to look at these as stovepipes. It will be up to you and your offices to put the pieces together. And that includes these financing pieces that we're talking about today. We're going to spend a lot of time at the NASEO annual meeting in October, the 11th to the 14th, discussing how to put the pieces together as it relates to these three financing programs that Laura shepherded through. We reached out to the Deputy Administrator, Janet McCabe at EPA, who has already spoken. We worked with her quite extensively when she was here in the Obama administration, and when she was an air director in Indiana many years ago. We reached out to her and to Joe Goffman to discuss how we were going to work together on implementation. They're very excited to work with you. And for some of the old timers here, you remember that, and this is what Laura was pressing, we spent a lot of time getting the air directors and the energy directors and the utility commissioners in a room together. It wasn't easy. No one spoke the same language, which was one of the hardest things. But it's happened and it's been successful. And we're going to continue that. For example, when the Volkswagen settlement funds came out, NASEO reached out to the National Association of Clean Air Agencies, NACA, the air directors, and there was a joint website set up by NASEO and NACA to go through VW settlement options on the EV side. And there is a joint AASHTO, American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, task force with NASEO now, along with our friends at DOE and DOT, which I would like to extend to EPA, Laura. Maybe we'll be talking to you about that on EV infrastructure implementation. So I'm not going to repeat what Laura said about these programs, but for the energy offices, please remember that first $7 billion that she talked about is state, local, tribal, and these eligible entities, which could include green banks. It's a competitive program, but the states are eligible for directly getting those funds. And that's how Laura wrote it. If you don't like it, you got to take it up with her, but she's done, right? As Laura did say, they have 180 days to issue essentially the guidance, or actually get the first round of money out in the statute. We'll see if they meet that. But the bottom line is there is a lot of opportunity. We're going to walk you through it. We want you to reach out for your partnerships with your green banks, with your locals, with your financing entities. It isn't rocket science, and there's a lot of people to help. And I'll stop there with my monologue and turn it over to Gwen. Hopefully we'll have a lot of time for questions at the end. But I really want to thank Laura for what she did and Mr. Carper and the committee did in getting this piece of the bill over the transom. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And, thank you for that walk through history. It reminded me of when the ARA funds came out. I was heading up a CDFI here, and we partnered with the State Energy Office and created the Green Sun Hawaii Loan Loss Reserve Fund. So you're right, that was the beginning of green financing for Hawaii. Good morning and aloha, everyone. So my job is to kind of give a perspective from a green bank perspective, or at least my green bank perspective. And I just wanted to share, as part of the American Green Bank Consortium, together with the Coalition for Green Capital, August 16th was a day of celebration, culminating many years of work towards establishment of a national green bank. during our 2019 Green Bank Summit, where I learned about legislation being introduced to establish a national green bank, and throughout the pandemic with bi-weekly consortium meetings via Zoom, we experienced many ups and downs as we followed the legislation over the past 3 years. So I echo Jeff's thanks to Laura for getting this passed and through the finish line. You know, as Laura explained, while Section 60103 appears to be 3 separate funds, and the funds could be deployed the way it's always been deployed by chopping it up and providing it to states and nonprofits where it will be one and done. These funds could actually be efficiently and effectively managed under a national green bank. This would be transformational. Having an entity for green banks nationwide to access a reliable source of funds, similar to how banks access funds through the Federal Home Loan Bank system, will be a game changer. We currently have 14 active green banks across the country. Our collective vision is to have a green bank in every state and US territory. And over the past 2 weeks, we have been hard at work expanding our big green tent by inviting community development financial institutions, community banks, foundation, energy justice advocates, and others to collaboratively work on setting the foundation for a national green bank. Imagine having an entity that is eager and willing to partner with every state energy office to administer grants, manage assets, securitize loan portfolios, and provide all of the other financial and technical assistance wraparound services required. While every state is eligible to apply for funding under the $7 billion carve-out, the National Green Bank is willing to provide resources to assist with your application process also. For states with green banks, enabling legislation varies from state to state. The Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority is fortunate in that our Chief Energy Officer, Scott Glenn, by statute is a member of the authority's board. And this provides for the State Energy Office and the authority to have ample opportunities and alignment to collaborate on initiatives that help to advance the goals of our state. So I'll stop here and turn it over to questions.
So we have one question in our question box that I'll get to first. This is actually a question for Jeff or Laura, I believe. But speaking of EECBG, this is from Bettina Virgo. Will NASEO or EPA or both be sharing guidance for states regarding setting up programs for pass-through funds to localities not getting direct allocations?
I think I'll handle that. I'll leave Laura to not worry about the energy efficiency and conservation block grant, since that was in the Senate Energy and Natural Resources jurisdiction. NASEO, as we did in 2009, what we did was set up plug and play programs, model programs for the 28% of the funds that run through your offices to the smaller local governments. NASEO is doing that now. David, Terry, Sam, who's on this call, and the NASEO team, Sandy Fazeli and others, have worked with E for the Future, which is a foundation, on putting some of those plug and play programs together. So the implementation of EECBG, again, our hope is that it will be easier than as last time. The problem, of course, is that the funding level is $550 million now, and under ARA it was $3.2 billion. There's nothing I can do about that. What we did do was work with the committee to ensure that the funds go out under a formula, so that the formula that was established in the 2007 statute, so that it wouldn't take a lot of negotiation with the Department of Energy. But the bottom line is, as it relates to 28% of that $550 million running through your offices, you will have wide discretion. You will be getting from NASEO some model programs you can work with your local governments on. We are going to have to work together, and we'll be discussing this in October at the NASEO annual meeting. We're going to have to work together to make sure we don't have a lot of confusion in the marketplace. That's what worries me a lot about the 60 programs at DOE and the myriad of programs at EPA and the HUD programs, the 975 million for public assisted housing, the building energy code programs. There's a lot of programs to piece together here. And as I mentioned earlier, our big challenge is to help you do it in as seamless a manner as possible. What we don't want to do is have contractors go to the door representing 3 different programs for individual consumers and confuse them. On the other hand, what we had in ARA at the beginning was DOE set up a centralized technical assistance process, which was an abject failure. And essentially we had to take that over. And the reason it is they hired a bunch of 23-year-olds. And if there are any 23-year-olds on the call, I apologize in advance. My kids were once that young. And what happened was that, I'll give you the North Dakota example. I got a call from the halftime city manager in a 600-person town in North Dakota. And all they wanted to do was replace a boiler in their municipal building that dated from 1930. That's all they wanted to do with their ECBG funds. They called the technical assistance provider Input at DOE, who sent her an 800-page white paper on financing programs for everything. She called me and she said, I don't have time to read 1 page. Just tell me how I can replace the darn boiler. And that's the challenge that you have at the energy office level, is essentially to distill it and these different programs in as usable a way as possible, so we're not confusing individual homeowners and small businesses and even larger businesses. We had a bit of a trough at the start of ARA on things like ESCO projects, energy service performance contracting projects, because people figured they would get grants rather than loans, so they didn't do anything for about 6 months. We want to avoid that as well. So it's a long-winded answer to say, we'll give you as much technical assistance as possible. We are working closely to get those models out to you. And the meeting in October, I think, will be a good opportunity for us to share potential best practices, as it is with Gwen and the folks in the Green Bank Consortium on how to do the Green Bank and the financing programs. Sorry about droning on, Robin and Eddie.
No problem. Laura, this is a competitive program, and will there be limits to the number of states that will receive funding in particular areas, or will it be such that although it's competitive, all that qualify will receive funding?
It's a really great question. So, and I'm assuming you're talking about the greenhouse gas fund, or are you talking about across the board? Yeah. So, I would, again, it's a huge amount. Let's start with the $7 billion. So, so Gwen provided some great context, some kind of the thought process of how we developed the greenhouse gas fund. So originally we talked about having one big national, climate bank. That was kind of the initial thought. And I would love to have all the credit for this, but our friends and Energy and Commerce and our team were lock and step in writing this language, because it not only needed to pass the House, but also needed to pass our political issues and also our parliamentarian. And we went before the parliamentarian several different times with the greenhouse gas fund. And we could not target the money to one national program. So I would expect that EPA will not target one national program. That is not to say that the EPA will not put a significant money into one national program that could feed other programs. I think that that will be discussed by the EPA. On the so let's start with the $7 billion. It is our intent, our conversations with the EPA, that money will go to states and tribes. I mean, essentially, I would be shocked, completely shocked, if a state, does apply that they don't get some money from that. It's $7 billion. That's an enormous amount of money. And just in the talking to EPA and on the significant amount of money for the clean school bus program, they have been open about trying to get money to every single state. Now, some states may not apply, right? So, I mean, EPA can't make states apply. This is a voluntary program. So that's actually why we provided, states, tribes, gave some, and so local governments, we gave some like flexibility there, because some states may not want to apply, but there may be a more local, there may be a tribe or another community that would want to apply for that fund. So there is some flexibility for that. So again, in that $7 billion, I see that as going to hopefully all states. Again, that has to target low income and disadvantaged communities. So what I'm suggesting to you today is look in your state. Where are your EJ communities? Where are your low income rural communities where financing just in general is very difficult or impossible for solar projects? That's something you can do today to start mapping, if you will, of like, where would you target some of those funds? I think Gwen Graves, I think she has resources. This organization has resources. NASCO or NASCA probably has, NACA, excuse me, gosh, I'm confusing my acronyms. Probably has some resources. This, your DEQ probably has assistance. So again, this is a conversation that maybe you are your DEQ. Yeah, it depends on the state, I know. But, having conversations across the your administration to try to target those people, to me, I would do that today. And then trying to get the EPA to tease out sooner than later of like, what will they define as low income and disadvantaged communities? I think you can look at the ARP as maybe some signal from them. But I think that's going to be a real question. Now, for the $8 billion and $11 billion, again, I see that more of that money going into, that's going to go into the banks. That's going to go, a portion of that may go into a national bank. Again, this is up to EPA to implement, but I would assume a portion of that may go into a big national bank. But I do think there will be money going into state banks as well. And hopefully our hope was to seed new green banks. And it's great that Gwen their group is already, trying to bring people more into the green tent. I love that. To help form banks to be able to be ready to receive this money. So I think there'll be like twofold. There'll be like a big chunk maybe going to one more national organization, and then another chunk maybe going to states. Again, it's a huge amount of money in a very, very short time. And I'm personally worried about it because it's such a short time. And so, I think if states can get organized sooner than later, which this is great, you're having this call, then there's more likely that more money will be trickled down to the state and the local level if you're more organized, because EPA's just got such a tight turnaround to get this out the door. And that was intentional. The greenhouse gas fund in particular is a very short timeline. So I hope that was helpful. And I also included in the chat, you guys are like, what is this? I included the definitions of what's an eligible entity for folks, and also provided what the funding could be used for, so that hopefully is a little clearer of there's direct funding and then there's indirect funding. And a lot of the indirect funding can go to not-for-profits. We made a change from the House language that, you know, there's a lot of minority banks that exist that could receive money now indirectly. The banks that you guys have set up, that money could be, you know, can receive money from a national bank. So if a money goes to a national bank, as Gwen was saying, then your state banks could still receive money through an indirect funding. I know this, hopefully this is, and this will become clear. EPA has been very great about webinars and explaining how they're gonna do this. You know, I know that they are already turning away on, you know, thinking about it. So I would, I would also call on EPA to have a discussion sooner than later. I found that with the Clean School Bus program, that was very helpful because this is new territory for EPA. EPA does do grants like DERA and Superfund grants and other grants, but we are pushing EPA's limits here. This is a new space. And I think maybe having conversations with them early than later could help them as well in their thinking of how best to get the money out.
Yeah, as I mentioned, Laura, earlier, we did reach out to Janet McCabe and Joe Goffman, and they were very enthusiastic about getting together to go over the state priorities. So we're very enthusiastic about that, as you knew they would be.
Yes, and what's good for Texas is different than Delaware, than different than Wyoming, than different than Alaska, right? So I think making sure that they understand the different state needs, I think is very, very important.
Thanks, Laura. Sam, when you get a chance, could you put the definitions that Laura posted in our private chat into the group chat so that those on the call can also see that? And then we have a kind of a multi couple of questions for you, Gwen. First of all, we want to know what your initial reactions are to this statute. And then there's another question in the chat as well. And it says, do you have thoughts you can share about how your green bank will interact with other financing entities in Hawaii that are also eligible for these funds?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So, you know, the timing of this greenhouse gas reduction fund is perfect because we are looking for resources to recapitalize our loan fund. We need more funds to lend. You know, with the National Green Bank, we are looking to expand our product mix for direct financing opportunities, as well as serve as an intermediary. This is to the point of the question, to assist our CDFIs and community lenders here in Hawaii to increase their green financing activity. So, you know, we'll be hopefully providing them not only loan capital, but also with some technical assistance to help them with their green financing activity. And our authority will also be expanding our work to facilitate solar adoption in our underserved communities statewide. Thanks.
Okay, this one's for everybody. Imagine you were the director of a state energy office. What's step one?
I'm sorry, say that again. I think you.
What's step one in the planning process? What if you're the director of a state energy office and you got to figure out, okay, I've got to get to step one, and there's just like you said, because of the enormous amount of funding, there are it's real easy just to lock up and say, holy cow, and your brain explodes. So what's step one? Where should everybody start?
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So I'll just go fast, really really fast. So, you know, I think it just depends. So if for state energy offices without green banks, I think you need to consider several things, right? if you want to establish a fully functional green bank. And is it going to be part of your energy office? Is it going to be a separate agency? What resources do you have, and what resources will you need? And also, what is the political temperature of establishing a green bank in your state? Or perhaps you might not want to do a fully functional green bank. You might want to serve as an intermediary and consider getting the funds so that you can then provide loan capital and technical assistance to support CDFIs and community banks to expand their green lending programs. For states that have green banks, work with your green banks to help identify low-hanging fruit projects that can be added to their pipeline in order to rapidly deploy the funds to reduce carbon emissions. I think would be very helpful and much appreciated by those green banks. Thanks.
I think that's the case. I also think, again, we're seeing this with the bipartisan infrastructure law. The most effective states, I believe, are the states that are having not just one person across the administration control everything, but having, a real team of people, together talking about, all right, because how are we going to do this? Because, for example, there is a huge amount of money here for low income and disadvantaged communities. Well, that may be money that, thinking your housing folks may have more information than you may have information. There's this money could be used for electrification on the transportation side, and your DOTs are really great in some places on the vehicles, but not so great of like, how are we going to get the electricity there? How are we going to get the transmission lines there? How are we going to talk to our utilities? And again, I'm just seeing a small bit of the bipartisan infrastructure law in the Clean School Bus program. And because that is targeting, that's clean, targeting EVs, targeting low income and disadvantaged communities. And it's really the states that have their Department of Education's at the table, their energy state at the table, their environmental group at the table, and their DOT at the table, all having conversations as being the most effective in applying for the funds that are going out the door right now. And I go back to the climate grants, the state grants. I do think that process, right? Getting money for you to help plan, right? To help plan, how do we, that is money to help you figure out what should we be investing in, right? So, I mean, we've provided that. Hopefully EPA can get that out the door quicker than, sooner than later. And again, that even applying for that money, you're gonna have to talk to each other, right? So I think, again, having the conversations, as Gwen said, really targeting, I would target for this money, looking where's the low income disadvantaged communities that need the most help and could really use the, where are the EJ communities that could really use this funding? Because I do know EPA, especially with Administrator Regan, he's going to be focused on how do I help frontline communities? How do I, how can we get this money out quickly? And again, you may not know that information. You probably do, honestly, maybe more than the air offices, but you need to have a full conversation with your other administration. That's what I would do. And then you're already doing my next recommendation is talking to EPA and getting their intel of what they think that these programs are how these programs are going to be implemented. And that will help you as well.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think the first call that you should make is to David Terry, NASEO's executive director, Sam Kramer, who's the NASEO staffer handling these financing programs, as well as Sandy Fazeli. That's call number one. Call number two is exactly what both Gwen and Laura said, and that is reach out to people who are doing this, whether it's the green banks, community banks, otherwise, and the other agencies. We have worked hard to cooperate with the National Association of Clean Air Agencies and the Environmental Council of the States, which is the state environmental commissioners. Now, NACA and ECOS don't always get along, as Laura knows well, but we get along with those agencies and with AASHTO, as well as the state housing offices. About half of the energy offices also have the weatherization, the low-income weatherization program as one of their divisions. So obviously those folks are in a better position to address that. One of the failings of the Department of Energy's pretty rigid rules on the weatherization program, even though we did get major changes, statutory changes done, is that it looks on a house-by-house basis, not on a neighborhood basis. So it doesn't help a neighborhood much if you weatherize one home and then the 5 houses next to it have holes in their roofs. So one of the attributes of, in my mind, of the program that Laura put together, especially on the low income side, is it gives us flexibility. Katie Thomas, who had been Senator Sanders' staffer, who wrote the first version of that bill, Katie had actually been an associate at our law firm, Laura, and Katie and I worked on that language originally. I had my doubts that it was ever going to get passed, but as you know, she was pretty determined individual. So we need to make sure that we coordinate these activities with everything else that you're doing. So coordinate with the other agency, reach out to NASEO, coordinate with the other agencies, reach out to your green banks. The team approach that Laura mentioned, I think, is critical. And don't wait for those other state agencies to come to you, because it may not happen. You have to go to them. And for states where there is, how can I put this in a genteel manner? Sometimes there's red state, blue city problems in certain states. Eddie, I noticed you're wearing a blue shirt today, by the way. But a lot of those states have been able to get past those issues by trying to depoliticize some of these programs. So for example, I'm going to put words in Eddie's mouth, when they set up a commercial PACE program in Texas, they authorized it at a local level. The locals came to Eddie's predecessor and his good friend, Dub Taylor, and said, we can't do this ourselves. Can you come up with a common underwriting standard? Which he did. And that helped that program move forward because their Lone Star program was so successful. They saw there were good models out there. So that's you have to be proactive. So I think I gave at least 5 things. I don't know what the order is anymore. Maybe Sam wrote it down, but what Laura and Gwen said, I agree with. Thanks.
Yeah, and again, as I said, $7 billion is going to solar. I know that. So just, like talking about low hanging fruit, like that, that I'm channeling. I would look at low income, disadvantaged communities that could use solar. And I would assume in all the states, there would be some kind of conversation with the utility, with a co-op. I think, those conversations should probably be happening now as well. Not that they're receiving the money, but again, they are part of the coalition, if you will. So just wanted to say that again.
Yeah, we have met with Chris McLean at Rural Utility Service, Laura, on those programs and rural development. So that's part of the puzzle. Eddie, Robin, Sam, what's next? Any other questions?
So we actually are at the end of the hour here. There are a few other questions in the chat box. Sam, should we close it up or try and address these questions? What would you recommend?
I think what we can do is I can also send these out to folks with who I have here and get everybody connected so we can have a conversation since we are a little bit over time.
Okay, that sounds great. So Sam will go ahead and take a look at that and get those answered for y'all. And if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to any of us or directly to Sam, and he can reach out to us as well. Thank you to Jeff, Gwen, and Laura for being on the call today. Lots of great information from Montana to hear. This is all good information for us as well. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I think there's some questions of how are we going to do this? There is opportunities for technical assistance from EPA as well. So again, I think having the questions to EPA of like, when do you think the technical assistance money may be coming out the door? Because to me, that makes sense that comes out earlier and maybe some earlier opportunities to help you, and maybe suggest that to EPA, because I think that could really help with some of the coordination and I know that the time is money for you all, and you all have other things that you're supposed to be doing every day as well. So I know this will probably take more man hours and more time, and so again, that might be a suggestion for EPA is, hey, there is some TA opportunities here. Could that come out the door sooner than later? So sorry, just kind of scrolling through the questions. That might answer a few of these questions.
That's a great suggestion. And a point of personal privilege, I really want to thank Laura for everything she did on this legislation, and
Thank you.
All of the states should know that. And Gwen's been a real mainstay on the financing activity at the local level. And I know we intend to keep working closely with the Coalition for Green Capital and the whole group. And Reed Hunt has spoken to the NASEO group before. So this isn't new to everyone, but thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.